Good morning. Please have a seat. We will start shortly. European Commissioner for Enlargement, members of the European Parliament, permanent representatives and ambassadors, Vice President and members of the European Economic and Social Committee, Directors General and Directors of the European institutions, bodies and services, representatives of trade unions and employers' organizations, and other authorities, ladies and gentlemen. As General Director of New Economy International Forum, I'm pleased to welcome you to this Forum Europa event, which we organize thanks to the essential contribution of 5 companies that demonstrate their strong commitment to Europe and its citizens every day: Airbus, Iberdrola, Indra, Santander, and Telefónica. As many of you know, we started our activities in Brussels last year under the motto "Ideas to Strengthen the Union," and since then, we have continued to consolidate Forum Europa as a meeting point for the political, economic, and social spheres of the EU, its member states, its neighbors, its partners. Today, we would like to continue exchanging ideas to strengthen the Union, and for that, we have the honor of welcoming Ms. Marta Kos, Commissioner for Enlargement, who will be introduced by Mr. Nacho Sánchez Amor, member of the Committee on Foreign Affairs of the European Parliament, as well as its Subcommittee on Human Rights, the delegation to the EU-Turkey Joint Parliamentary Committee, and the delegation to the Euronest Parliamentary Assembly. After the introduction by Mr. Sánchez Amor and the speech by Commissioner Kos, we will open the floor for questions. I look forward to getting them and kindly ask you to write them as concisely and clearly as possible. That would be very helpful. Without further ado, Mr. Sánchez Amor, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Diego, Director General. Thank you very much, José Luis, President of the New Economy Forum, for this opportunity and for all these years of commitment. Dear Commissioner, although I have some doubts about your choice for the presenter, I must commend the election of this forum, which has a long-standing reputation in Spain. Nueva Economía Forum is what you could call the place to be for Spanish politics and business world. Everybody wants to be in it. It's a space for analysis and debate under the principles of independence and pluralism, things more needed now than ever. Therefore, I can only praise the decision to launch, in the beginning of the last year, this Forum Europa, following the strong pro-European vocation of Nueva Economía Forum. Dear Commissioner, dear Marta, you started your mandate with one advantage and one disadvantage. The advantage is rather obvious for those who have been around. Let's say politely that your predecessor didn't set the bar too high. Particularly with the Parliament, the relationship was rather turbulent, stormy even, to say the least. Because he left that microphone open and we could all hear what he really thought about the members of Parliament. Anyway, the appreciation went both ways, that's for sure. The disadvantage is in somehow positive extra burden in this your first term of office. During your hearing, you raised high expectations, both in the Parliament and in the Brussels bubble at large. Your performance was convincing and consequently praised by most of my colleagues. This means, however, that the risk of frustration is also greater. Perhaps there is something of that in the hard scrutiny of each of your social media posts, where something as harmless as the word constructive can unleash another critical letter with some signatures of my colleagues. Regarding the domestic noise around your election as Commissioner, don't worry, it wasn't just your case, it happened in many countries, and it goes away quickly. There was much more fuss about Teresa Rivera, and there are colleagues here that can assure you this. Your government decision had the aroma of a rescue operation for a top-level outsider, apparently forever lost to public life and its bitterness, which you had experienced firsthand not long before. Your country fought hard for one of the important portfolios and, after changing candidates, blessed operation, seemed to be satisfied. The enlargement dossier for any politician from Slovenia or Croatia is almost a home affair, at least a family affair. because you have in your personal and collective memory the demands and the hardship of a process that turns the country, any country, upside down. And this is the guarantee also for a great deal of empathy. The Slovenian proposal for the Commissioner was quite multifaceted and comprehensive. A woman whose personal baggage included, it's a long list, experience as a Jones swimmer, always useful in the rough waters of Brussels, with an academic background in journalism, able to transform her speech into headlines, a presenter of public television trained to navigate the political pressures of power, a foreign correspondent able to put some distance from the domestic turmoil, as an editor in a foreign media outlet whose experience in working environment different than your own, as a government spokesperson able to see things from the other side of the mirror, in front of the microphones and not behind them, as a director of a chamber of commerce, displaying professional skill to reset yourself from the public life to private, as a businesswoman with her own company assisting other businesswomen, it is evident she does not need much training in self-employment, as an ambassador posed in and outside the European Union, which implies perfect diplomatic training for other international responsibilities, including, Marta, managing tensions with your own ministry. I didn't know if it was tension or quarrel, let's say tensions at that time. As a candidate for president of your country with a progressive program of moral regeneration that seasoned in the delicacies of the electoral campaign, a politician who resigned from your party responsibilities for unexplained reasons according to media, which adds to your profile that very convenient pinch of mystery. And again back to the world of business and consultancy outside of your country, from which the Slovenian authorities once again dragged you out to propose you as commissioner. Dear Marta, after this succinct review of your career, I think the only serious risk you had as a commissioner designate was to be rejected in comparison as overqualified. In the bubble, as I said, you created early and justified expectations, which you are more than fulfilling. With regard to the Parliament, you quickly understood that in the current climate, weaving complicity and alliance with the groups is a must in order to run your office with as few upheavals as possible. Our institutional relation will go through ups and downs and periods of turbulence and misunderstanding. This is an iron law between parliaments and executives. But you have created a climate of trust that will eventually prevail over occasional disagreements. Your frequent presence in the House in a few months, while the High Representative had to excuse her absence several times, has brought you very quickly to the status of being a regular at the MEPS bar in Strasbourg, which is almost a nobility title that heads of cabinet have desired for years for the commissioner. Here, Marco, you have to take note of this. Personally, I found you as someone willing to stir up a hornet's nest with a certain degree of caution. I for sure don't think you came to Brussels just to warm the chair and to do business as usual. I'm aware you have plans to move our always lazy enlargement policy de las musas al teatro. This is a Spanish expression that could be adapted, that you are here ensuring that this appetite for enlargement is reasonably sated in the coming years without falling into the disordered bulimia of other times. From the trust that many of us in the Parliament feel knowing this difficult dossier is in your hands, I would like to stress only two ideas that I think could be used for you. First, don't fall into the trap of those who will use the need to fix the house first as an unmovable obstacle for enlargement. Indeed, we need to fix the house, but we should be able to do it even with the necessary accession of those first in line. Second, and finishing, we all know the weight of geopolitics nowadays, and one of the good news about it is that it has revived enlargement policy, but please resist the temptation of giving up the real purpose of the accession process. It's a merit-based thing, and we have learned the hard way that there shouldn't be any shortcut for those who want to be members of still a club of mature democracies. Dear ladies and gentlemen, it's my great pleasure and honor to invite you to listen to Commissioner Kos, leading actor in one of the most transformational portfolios which will define the European Union in the coming decades. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sánchez Amor. Commissioner, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Dear Nacho, you have studied me really well. I was just waiting which secrets out of my life you would reveal here. It's great to be here, dear ladies and gentlemen. And if I go on, Nacho, on your narrative, I really have the best job in the world. And I'm very passionate about it. And some people say, calm down, calm down. It is not that easy. I know it's not easy. That's why it's the best job I can have. Because when it's easy, it is easier done. But it's not then easy, then you have to be strong and you have to have around you a coalition of people who will help you to reach the goal. And to reach the goal, what I can do with my team, with the help, I would say, nearly all of you, is what I'm really doing. It is a unification of Europe. Never before we have been able to unite the Europe. Now, for the first time, we really have a real chance, if we do it right, that we unite Europe through the enlargement process. All member states are faced with three great challenges: the challenge of peace, the challenge of freedom, and the challenge of prosperity. And it seems clear that they can only be met through the European dimension. These words are not mine. This quote is more than 40 years old. Simone Weil said this in 1979 during her first speech as the President of the European Parliament. In that same speech, she described Europe as an island of freedom surrounded by regimes in which force prevails. And she argued that to safeguard peace, freedom, and prosperity in Europe, we should bring in and stabilize Greece, Spain, and Portugal. 3 countries which have just freed themselves from dictatorships. We did that, and it worked. I know we have many Spaniards, Portuguese, and Greeks here, but I would like to see your hands. Please raise your hands. So you are a part of this history. Thank you. Nacho, you too. After the end of the Cold War, we followed the same model. When I finished the university and then went to work as a journalist to Germany, Europe went through the greatest geopolitical transformation since World War II. I was a journalist at the Deutsche Welle first. We saw the Berlin Wall fall, the Soviet Union dissolve, and democracy return from Estonia to Poland to Bulgaria. We saw the reunification of Germany, and we dreamt of the unification of the entire continent. To stabilize our continent, we followed once again Simone Weil's advice. We brought the newly free countries of Central and Eastern Europe into the EU. My country, Slovenia, was one of them. It was a time of great statesmen like Helmut Kohl, François Mitterrand, and Mikhail Gorbachev, and a time of thinking outside the box. To this day, the enlargement of the early 2000s are the greatest geopolitical success of our union. It anchored those young democracies and helped them thrive. Do we have somebody from those countries, enlargement 2004? We're not that much, but great. Yes, in the past decades, we have seen the disappearance of borders that once divided Europeans. And everywhere we could see that with the physical barriers, many historical tensions faded away. Yes, the European Union is still and again a peace project. Unfortunately, the country of my youth took the opposite direction. I consider it as one of our European Union's saddest moments that, except for Slovenia and Croatia, we did not follow the model that was so successful in Southern and Central Eastern Europe. We failed to use a credible prospect of EU membership as an instrument to achieve reconciliation, remove these borders once again, help bilateral issues disappear, and complete our union by bringing in all of Southeast Europe. During the last 15 years, the EU was consumed by a debt crisis, by the challenges of migration, by a member leaving the Union, and by the consequences of the pandemic. Our focus was mainly directed to the inside. But windows of opportunities open and close. Today, our continent is again in motion. We are again seeing a geopolitical realignment shaking the foundations of our continent. We see the tide of freedom receding, and Europe once again at risk of becoming an island surrounded by autocracies. In many ways, the situation we are facing today is, in my opinion, more dangerous than in the 90s, because we also see populism and illiberalism surge within our union. But one thing is unchanged. The European unity is the best way to meet the challenges we face. As in Simone Weil's time, they are peace, freedom, and prosperity. And today, I would add security. First and foremost, in Ukraine. The way this war ends will shape the future of Europe for decades to come. Europe needs to shape the peace, and it needs to shape the post-war landscape of the continent. Just like in the 90s, we need bold decision. We need out-of-the-box thinking in the times where there is no box. What does this mean for enlargement? Let me outline our thinking. A new momentum on enlargement is back because a new consensus has taken hold that we can best manage the challenges of our time if our neighbors are with us, not just as partners, but as members of the European Union. My candidate countries, my candidate countries have realized that and are delivering reforms faster than ever before. Some of them faster, some of them not that fast. At the current pace, seeing a new wave of EU enlargement by 2030 is a very realistic perspective. With Albania and Montenegro, we have already taken some important steps forward during my mandate. And we are working towards opening the first clusters with Ukraine and Moldova as soon as possible. That first cluster is on fundamentals, on building a judiciary that is independent and can fight corruption effectively, on making sure that the media is free and independent, on ensuring fair public procurement. No one should have an interest in blocking the start of those negotiations. Both Ukraine and Moldova fulfilled the criteria to open. Both deserve to move forward now. I would like to see the same commitment from all candidates. My message to those who are still lacking on reform is windows of opportunity open and close. Do not miss this one. This was also my message in Serbia 2 weeks ago. Work with us on the reforms to make EU membership possible, on an independent judiciary, on free media, and on democratic institutions, and make the whole society part of this transformation, as you have said, Nacho. Citizens are asking for it. At the same time, we need to be clear that just working with candidates on the reform is no longer enough. This was enough in the 80s when Spain joined, or in 2000s when my Slovenia joined, but our current set of candidates is having a more difficult path. Namely, for the first time in the history, we are confronted with the external disruptive forces who would like to see us fail. In the past, it was easier. If the candidate has fulfilled the criteria, this was the first phase, the EU got them in, or it. Second phase, in my opinion, if the candidate fulfilled the criteria and the EU was willing to take them in, it was possible. Today, even if the candidate fulfills the criteria, even if the EU will, we have to find those forces who would like to see us fail. Ukraine is the obvious example for this. Their choice for closer links to the EU led to the revolution of dignity on the Maidan and the Russian invasion of 2014. This is the time when conflict started. It didn't start with the war in 2022. It started in 2014 when Ukraine decided that it wanted to be closer to the European Union. Or take Moldova. I have just been there for 3 days mission, which faced electoral interference and also energy blackmail. Our future member states need to be sure that we stand up for them when they get under attack, to shield them where we can, just like we expected to stand them by side with us and enhance our security. And how do we do that? Let me start with the example of Moldova, because it is less known. This winter, Russia cut off gas supplies to Moldova and then blamed it on the President Sandu. And this was clearly meant to destabilize the government and discredit the country's European path. Our response was bold. We provided Moldova with financing to push the energy prices back down again. We kicked off the integration of Moldova into the European electricity market, and this will completely decouple from the Russian energy by the end of next year. Just for comparison, it took the Baltic states 15 years to do this energy integration. And third, we approach Moldova respecting its full territorial integrity. Our offer included that Transnistrian region where a humanitarian crisis was looming, and it worked. Nobody in Moldova had to go without light or heating, and we diffused the topic as a vote winner for those who want to weaken Europe, and we demonstrated that in turbulent times, the EU is a partner to rely on. In the last 3 days, I have been, as I told you, in Moldova to build on this, because we also need to engage in a battle of narratives. What do we hear from the Russian narratives? You will lose your identity. The EU will destroy local agriculture. EU aid will indebt your country for years. Those narratives are being planted all the time. And this is why for the last 3 days, I have toured the country together with our team in Moldova, with the representatives of the Moldova's government, with local journalists and with influencers. I also asked 2 Romanian members of the European Parliament to join me, Mr. Mureșan and Mr. Barna, who have been a great support to me. And we went to towns and villages. We met mayors, farmers, entrepreneurs of young people. We went to the areas where they voted more than 90% against the EU on the referendum, and they were really surprised when I asked them why. On one hand, they all want our money because their villages, their cities need it. But when I asked the question, how can you then vote pro-Russian? What is Russia giving you? The future? So they explained to me, they opened up, I learned a lot, and I also have done this to take away their fears. Why is this important? I told them I'm coming from a smaller country than Moldova is, but I can really, out of our own experience, fight those narratives. EU is not a charity. We don't give the money just like this. We help country developing. And if the growth plan for Moldova will run well, and I will sure we could double the GDP in the country in 10 years, we could establish 100,000 new working places, losing the identity. Who is protecting my language better than the European Union? My Slovene language is one of 24 official languages. You will not be able to use do your culture, use your culture. Come on, we are protecting the culture, and so on. And of course, I have eaten all your, Mr. Ambassador, all your precious dishes, including placenta, and I told them you will be able to eat your placenta even when you will be in the European Union. But this is what the Russians are telling them, not anymore. Yes, our candidates need to be certain that we are there for them when they get under attack, be it energy blackmail or election interference. Ukraine is, of course, where we are taking this logic even further, not out of charity, but also out of clear European self-interest. Because nobody is right now contributing more to European security than the Ukrainian armed forces. They are Ukrainians' security guarantee for the rest of Europe. And besides military support, the best thing we can do to support them is helping Ukraine achieve secure energy supplies, economic strength, and industrial capacity. And we are doing this with the energy support package we agreed in February. We are doing this by accelerating the integration of Ukraine into many more parts of the single market, to attract more investments, to strengthen Europe-wide value chains, and to create new opportunities for both Ukrainian and, of course, European businesses. And we are doing this by investing substantial resources into Ukraine's reconstruction and economic transformation, for example, through our Ukraine investment framework, which will help unlock at least 40 billion euro in public and private investments. It is helping EU companies to invest in Ukraine and help rebuild houses, roads, bridges, ports, schools. All these measures to integrate Ukraine in European structures we are already taking now, even before the membership, and they are first steps towards membership, and we are taking them as rapidly as possible. The whole negotiation process with Ukraine and Moldova is 2 to 3 times quicker than we have done this in the past. I am pushing my people here in Brussels. Around 1,000 people in all different areas are working just for one enlargement country. And this is something that enjoys full support also in the College of Commissioners, and which we could not do if my colleagues in charge of the single market energy defense were not equally committed. Yes, the geopolitical situation we face demands bold decisions on Ukraine, but our goal is not just a faster pathway for Ukraine alone. It could be a new blueprint for accelerated European integration for all the candidate countries in parallel to their accession track. This runs like a thread through all the initiatives the Commission has launched in recent months. All of them are already factoring in our candidates. We did that with the EU Competitiveness Compass. We did that with the Clean Energy Deal, and again with the Internal Security Strategy, because it is in our shared interest that our future members are as deeply embedded into those structures as possible. And all of those developments makes me really optimistic about Europe, and I'm not a dreamer. In 1979, when Simone Weil described Europe as an island of freedom surrounded by regimes where force prevailed, that island was very small and confined to the northwestern corner of the continent. Several waves on enlargement have transformed us, for sure. Today, we are 450 million people. We have an economy 10 times the size of Russia's, and we are far more innovative and technologically advanced. Today, we have networks of friendships spanning the globe, and there are countless countries around the world which are now looking for closer ties and are more in trade with Europe. President von der Leyen recently told us that she could have conversations with heads of state and governments around the world 24 hours a day. This is true from the United Arab Emirates to New Zealand to Mexico, from India to Indonesia to the Mercosur countries. They all want to have a free trade agreement with Europe. Why is this happening now? And it happened after the announcement of the tariffs coming or imposed, possibly, from the United States of America. So why are they calling us? Why do they want to have closer trade relations with Europe? Because we are predictable, because we are reliable. I know that some people say that we are bureaucratic and that our decision-making process is slow. But at the same time, as I have said, we are predictable and we are reliable. And of course, it is easier to get a decision when there is an autocrat who dreams about something and the next day there is a decision. And we have to get a decision of EU27. So, we are an anchor of stability, of democratic values, and increasing also a security partner. And thanks to our American friends, this is once again seen as something very valuable. So yes, I am optimistic about Europe. I know we have the power to adapt and reform. We have always reacted well when there have been crises. When there was an agriculture and food crisis in the 60s, in 1962 we have gotten the common agriculture policy. When there was an economic crisis in the 80s, in 1986, we have gotten the common market. When there was a crisis, financial crisis in 2008, in 2014, we have gotten the banking union. And we could handle the COVID crisis. So I believe that with greater European cooperation, we will be able to confront the enemies of freedom and of Europe together. As I said, there is really no box anymore, so let's think boldly. Our union has always been built by those who dared to think beyond the constraints of their time. Just as in Simone Weil's time, and again after the Cold War, we need to rise to the challenge and complete the unification of our continent. Let us make sure that one day, when a commissioner like me tells the history of European unification, also those from Podgorica, Kiev, Tirana, Chisinau or Belgrade will also be able to raise their hands, because they all will be part of the final chapter. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And Sarah, you're right.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Please stay where you are for the Q&A session. Stay where you are, please. Where you were. Thank you. And we will start the Q&A session. With this question, if you don't mind, on Ukraine, although you already addressed some of these topics in your speech. An article published on Politico yesterday raised concerns that Ukraine's EU accession process may be fast-tracked under geopolitical pressure, particularly with reports that US President Donald Trump is urging Kyiv to accept a peace deal with Russia this week in Turkey. The article also highlights persistent issues of corruption in Ukraine. How do you respond to criticism that the EU risks sidelining core accession criteria in favor of strategic speed? And how would the EU react if peace talks externally driven by great powers undermine Ukraine's EU trajectory or reform momentum?
Thank you. Yes, we are in special geopolitical times where we should, as I have said, react quickly and boldly. But the whole accession process is a merit-based process. So the country has to fulfill many criteria, do many reforms to be able to become a member of the EU. Why? Because we also have to protect our EU. You know, once I was telling to somebody that probably the only thing where nobody is against from Russia, US, and the EU is the taking Ukraine into the EU. But then somebody told me, yes, but you know, we have to be careful. whom do we take on board, that we will not get a Trojan horse inside the European Union. Never before, and he was right. Never before, we had to think in these dimensions, but under the line, and going back to your questions, why is it taking so long? When I was at the Munich Security Conference, one of the American senators told me, if you want to have Ukraine in the EU, take them in tomorrow. Then I told him, it is not like becoming a member of NATO. It is much quicker. It is a political process. And the enlargement process is also a political process, but they have to do many, many reforms. And when we accelerate, and we do, when we accelerate, but not just for Ukraine, the accession process, we do it quicker. And we do it with already integrating, we call it gradual integration or accelerated integration into the European common market, even before they will become a member. So it is a merit-based process, and it will be a merit-based process. Ukraine and all the other countries have to do really many, many reforms. We are following them, but we are also helping them. We are helping, back to your question on fighting the corruption, we are helping them to be resistant to what could ruin the democracy or what could harm the businesses. Why are we starting with the fundamentals in every accession process? The fundamentals, we call it is about judiciary. It is about building up the system who will be able to fight for democracy, for human rights, protecting minority. At the same time, one part or chapter of the first cluster is public procurement. Why? Because a lot of corruption is made there. So we are helping fighting the corruption. We are helping the candidate countries. Sometimes it goes easier, sometimes it is not that easy. Why? Because, the government and the parliament can make the best anti-corruption institutions. If the people in the country accept corruption as a normal way of life, then it cannot be successful.
Thank you very much. There's a question from Ralph Gemetzke of the International Center for Migration Policy Development, and it says, what's next in EU-Turkey relations? Migration is often described as a toxic topic. Can migration be a positive force in the enlargement process?
Turkey is still a candidate country, but our relations are going on two paths. We do not negotiate. There is a standstill in the negotiation process. On the other hand, Turkey is a very important partner to Europe. Last year, we made 234 billion trade in services and goods with Turkey. You, many businessmen and women sitting here, you know that this is a high number. You have been mentioning migration. Turkey has helped us control better the migration flows in Europe, and that's why it is our partner. We help them when they have had an earthquake. And of course, whenever we do with Turkey, we also mention that there is a problem with the democracy, that there is a problem with the corruption, and there is a problem with the free media and political prisoners. But especially because we have good relations to them, we can speak openly. Based on the Council conclusions, this year we have started with the high-level dialogues with Turkey. And the first we have had at the beginning of April, it was high-level dialogue on economy. It went well. Soon we will have a high-level dialogue on migration. And we are working together, and this is where I see a very important role of Turkey in our new Black Sea strategy. Many, many, many connections are passing through Turkey, and I really firmly believe that there is interest on both sides to work hand in hand with Turkey.
Thank you very much. Albanian Prime Minister Edi Rama, Socialist Party, secured a fourth consecutive term in Albania's parliamentary elections. How does the European Union assess Albania's current trajectory towards EU accession, and what measures are being considered to ensure the EU standards are upheld throughout the process? Thank you.
Albania is really on a good way. Their prime minister, perhaps also the new prime minister, said that Albania could finish the negotiations until the 27, and then usually it takes 1 to 2 years for the whole ratification process. So I'm responsible for the technical part for the negotiations, then it is up to the member states. What I liked, what is going on in Albania, that they are really true believer in the European Union. Now, at the past parliamentary election, there was nearly no political party being against Europe. And when I asked the Prime Minister, how many people are in favor of the EU enlargement, he told me 98%. And I told him, please, dear Edi Rama, be careful. These are the numbers I know from the communist time. But it is hardly to believe that 98% said, Commissioner, this is the truth. So they are really developing well. But of course, there are some areas where we have to be very careful. And one of them is fighting the corruption, free media, and we are now in the process of negotiating those chapters. When I say negotiating, it is every candidate country has to bring their legal system into the European one, or they have to take over the European legal order, which is called European acquis. So this is a huge work. On the other hand, this is the only way we can keep Europe unified. They have to be the same rules, for the companies. They have to be the same legal certainties that if the companies will invest, they will be protected. And I could go on.
Thank you very much. There's a question from Chris Burns of Euronews. Why not simply closer ties with candidate countries instead of a full membership? Which candidate is closest to join?
Yeah. Thank you, Chris. Once I got the question, wouldn't it be easier, considering the sometimes quite complicated situation in the Western Balkans, if we could take them in tomorrow, like the senator from US said, and then we will handle the problems like between Belgrade and Pristina much easier than as long as they are no members. I will go back to the point I was stressed before. We also have to take care about our European Union and the member states. Montenegro and Albania are the fastest. We have already opened all the chapters with Montenegro, so now we are just closing. And from the technical point of view, we could close the negotiations at the end of 26 with Montenegro. But I would also like to stress or put out Moldova. Their government is really very much into the European membership because of one special reason. There is really, usually when we talk about insecurity or the role of security, we speak about Ukraine. But we should speak about the security issue also in Moldova. Namely, if they have parliamentary elections in September, if we lose Moldova, then we could get Russian influence or even Russian military directly to the European border. That's why we are supporting them.
Thank you very much. You mentioned the Western Balkans, and there's a question from Bojan Stanic of the Chamber of Commerce in Serbia. Do you expect that the whole Western Balkans will be integrated in the EU at once, similar as it was the case of 10 Central and Eastern European countries back in 2004? Yes.
No, this is not possible because it is a merit-based principle, meaning that we can only, bring the country forward if they deliver, and some of the countries haven't delivered yet. One side. The other side is we have countries who have been more advanced, and if they would have to wait, it will be really bad for the whole Western Balkans. There is no other choice than bring them in, and we really shouldn't forget Western Balkans when we sometimes put forward Ukraine and Moldova. But I love to say that if we would wait with the accession process for 20 years, like North Macedonia is waiting since 2005, we would start negotiations with Ukraine in 2045. So I understand frustration coming from this area. That's why I was speaking about the window of opportunity. Years back, the last 10 years before the new mandate of the new Commission, there was no unity in doing the enlargement. Now it is, and now again we have the influence of the geopolitical situation.
Thank you very much. There's a question from Alberto Tuxtera from Diplomatic World. Any updates on the EU-facilitated normalization process between Kosovo and Serbia?
An anecdote, when I first met Mr. Vučić in December, he told me, you know, I know the date of your birthday, and this is the date when there was a Kosovo battle and we lost. Now let's talk about Kosovo. So we have been discussing with some gentlemen before coming to this hall how difficult sometimes is everything what is happening in the Western Balkans, because this is the geographic area which is full on ups and downs in the history, which is full of wars. You know, we had the war in the 90s on the territory of ex-Yugoslavia, also a bit 10 days in Slovenia, which was nothing compared to later in Croatia and Bosnia. And if you have asked me, you know, in Slovenia, when we declared our independence on 25th of June 91, 3 hours later, the tanks of the Yugoslav army rolled out and attacked us. If you would ask me exactly in the minute when we have declared our independence, if there would be a war, I would bet €1 billion, never, 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 because I lived in those countries. I grew up in the country where it was really not important if you are a Slovene, a Serb, a Croat, a Muslim, a Bosnian. It wasn't important. But the war happened. But it has never happened after the Second World War on the territory of the EU member states. So coming back to Kosovo and Serbia, from both countries, we have really strong commitments that they are working on the normalization, that they are willing to fulfill two very important agreements they have set, but the process is very, very slow. And I will use the words what I would expect in this area, and especially from Serbia and Kosovo. Once I asked the Prime Minister of Albania, Edi Rama, how can he be successful? You know, this is another example of a communist country, a special art, if I say. How is it possible that they are advancing so much in the accession process? And he told me, you know, we look with the eyes of the past in the future, but some of the countries in the Western Balkan are looking with the eyes of the future in the past. And this is the big difference. I want to look into the future to find the solutions. I don't look back in the history to find excuses or to push the nationalistic narratives. And in this respect, I really expect from all the leaders in the Western Balkans, actually from all the leaders in the candidate countries, that they really live what they promise, that they are serious about the European path. You know, if you have a prime minister or the president of the states whose public statements are against the EU, how, gosh, will you persuade your people that EU accession path is good for the country?
Thank you very much. Well, this could be a day-long conference, but we need to get to the final questions. or the final question in this case. Bruegel estimates that enlargement will raise the EU budget slightly, but shift cohesion funds away from current beneficiaries like Spain and Italy. How do you plan to maintain solidarity while managing this redistribution?
I cannot speak a lot about the new MFF because we are in the hottest phase. How will it look like? But just some numbers. With the enlargement processes in 2004 with 10 countries, and then Romania and Bulgaria in 2007, around 100 million people joined the EU. My enlargement group today, if I put Turkey out, is 60 million people. It's 19 million. It's, let's say, it's 41, 42 million Ukraine, and the rest are all the other countries. So, in the new MFF, I expect that we will consider both scenarios, that we will have enough money for the pre-accession process so that we will be still able to help countries going the European path, and because there is a real possibility that we will get 1 or 2 or even more new member states until 2030, that there will be also money considered in the cohesion pot for the new member states.
Thank you very much. Please stay where you are. Before we get a final comment from you, I would like to thank you on our behalf and on behalf of our sponsors, Airbus, Iberdrola, Indra, Santander and Telefónica. Now, please, a final word from you before we close. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for listening to a passionate commissioner who really believes that Europe is worth fighting for. My mother, she was born in 1932, and she is already dead. Whenever we had problems in the family, she was telling, as long as there is no war, everything will be okay. And we have been really fed up with her, said, stop, Mama, there will be no war anymore, so be calm. Said, no, I just tell you, no war, everything okay. But now, dear Mama, yes, as long as there is no war, everything will be okay. But we have to do something that there will be no war. And in December, I used to say when I was still a candidate, and thank you for helping me becoming a commissioner, dear Nacho. I appreciate this a lot. All of your exchanges were very, very valuable to me, and this I will never forget. In December, I used to say that enlargement today is different than it was 5 years back. Today, I say that enlargement today is different than it was in December. Because in December, even if there was already a war in Ukraine, it was not what we got after the new US administration. And the new US administration has put up to new challenges. And I think that we are responding well, in the sense of, really, we can be strong? Of course we can be strong. Sometimes I think that we are not self-confident enough, that we rely on that somebody else will take care of us. But why? Why should they? I know that defense is not a common European policy. But if there is an interest of the majority of the member states and partners like UK and many others, let's work together on peace project. And this is, something I have never expected, that in 2025 we will speak about peace project in Europe again. Can you imagine? And that's why I see enlargement today so much important. It is not only about the enlargement. It is not only about getting European Union bigger in square kilometers or bigger in the numbers of people. It is really making a huge community who will protect the values, where the researchers will be able to also research diversity or climate change or vaccines, which they cannot do in the US, more supported by their government. And let's become more I would say, technically independent. I don't know what will happen if Microsoft will switch off all the lines to Europe. Probably we would be stopped. And we have already found some answers. For instance, at the college, we have adopted a program, AI Continent, where we are building so-called AI factories through Europe. One of the AI factories is in my Slovenia. We are 2 million people, but we will have one of the biggest AI factories in Europe. Last week, we have adopted Choose Europe program. It is a program where we will attract researchers from all over the world that they will be able to research whatever they want. And there are even signs, we know from the public and the media that Iceland is considering coming back to the negotiating process. In the past, we have already closed 13 chapters with Iceland. And when then I was discussing with the people of Iceland, why? And they told me, we want to belong to a community of values and democracy. And this is from the country which is through the EEA, European Economic Area, integrated in the European Union by probably 98%. And the rule of law is really on a very high level. And they see the advantage being the member of the EU. I will be really very happy if they come back. Why? Because Europe is attractive. Europe is attractive because of the market, but not only. In these times, you didn't tell me how long I have been, so now I'm just talking, but I will come to the end. Many times I get the question, but isn't the economy the most important part? Is it still worthwhile fighting for values? Yes, of course it is. I think that without the values, and we are really world champion in protecting the values in the European Union, what would we be? And in this respect, it takes more time, of course. It takes more time if you build up a system of democracy. It takes more time if you have to explain to the candidate countries that free media count, or that they have to have freedom of expression. For us, it is normal. For many candidate countries, it is not. So, in this respect, when I speak about enlargement, it is really about the unification of Europe. The Romans have tried. The Habsburgs have tried. Napoleon tried to unify Europe. They didn't make it. We have the chance to make it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.